Welcome to All Wheel Driven, a podcast by Audi Club North America where we explore all things Audi and the incredible people who bring it to life. All Wheel Driven is presented by XPEL, the official paint protection film of Audi Club North America. I'm your host, Zach Miller, and today Chris May and I talk with Tyler Setterstrom, builder, enthusiast, and one of the driving forces at Pacific German, a shop known for tuning some of the cleanest and most thoughtful Audi and VW builds on the West Coast. You may recognize Tyler's name from his standout project, a rare Imola Yellow Audi S3. Originally never sold in the US, this car was imported from Mexico and transformed into a road trip-ready Porsche-inspired showpiece. Today, we're digging into Pacific German's roots, what keeps Tyler inspired in the Audi scene, and where the road is taking them both next. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of All Wheel Driven. Let's get started. Thanks for joining the show with us. Chris and I are happy to talk with you and just kind of learn more about Pacific German and the story behind your shop and, of course, your builds like the 8L S3 that was mentioned in Quattro Mag. We'll get to all that down the road in the show here, but would love to just hear kind of a quick intro from yourself, like your backstory. I know it's a family business, and just kind of hear more about how it all came together and the journey from then to today.
Yeah, well, if you don't know me, my name is Tyler Setterstrom. I work here at Pacific German in Laguna Hills, California. We're in Southern California. All that we do is I'd say we like to have fun with, but we work on and enhance and maintain and whatnot Volkswagen brand cars. So Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Bentley, Lamborghini. Certain days I'll have a Volkswagen Beetle next to an Aventador in the shop, and it's just like the coolest thing to have like the broadest range of Volkswagen spectrum. And it's to learn how to work on these cars, to be around them and drive them, and it's definitely been a joy. And it's a family business. So my dad's the owner, my mom runs the books, my sister runs the front office, I'm one of the techs / like everything here, and then my brother's one of the techs also, and we have a few other techs working for us, which are awesome guys. They're just not family, obviously, but it's been a really good time. We've been in business here in South Orange County for the last like almost 15 years, and then prior to that we were in Riverside for like 15 or 20 years or so. I've been working with my dad like ever since I was like in Pampers and just like hanging out in the garage or working on cars, and it's like always something I wanted to do. For me to like grow up doing that and then just turn it into a career and something I want to do every day. I think that's the best part, is it's not really a job for me. It's something that I get to go hang out with my family, which is always a plus, and then work on cars and make money doing it. So it's like definitely the coolest gig I can think of to have.
Yeah, that's the dream right there, man. And what kind of work do you get yourself involved in with the cars? Are you all of the brands? Do you focus on just Audis and VWs?
Kind of everything with everything. So the reality is, I started out just working on cars. My dad would run the office, and then it turned into me being more up on like the newer cars of like mods and, the fun stuff that people wanted to do. So then I would start talking to the customers directly, and whether any brand in the Volkswagen realm. And then also I've learned some of the BMW, Ferrari, McLaren, some of our customers have all these cars. So I've learned that too, and I can support them. But yeah, so I'll do everything from, cleaning my own stall, take out the trash, all the janitorial stuff, to actually work on the cars, doing the builds and conversions, to taking the customer's money at the end of the day and making sure they're happy. So wearing all the hats, I don't pay the bills. That's the important part. I don't have to worry about the money thing, but I like to take it and I like to make people happy. So, but yeah, I kind of do everything here with everything. So.
Yeah, very cool. And how big is the whole team gotten these days with the entire Pacific German brand?
Yeah, so we have, we're always looking for more techs. Shout out if anyone here is watching and they would like work on cars in California. But we have 4 techs right now, plus myself, and I don't really know if I'm considered a tech or front office anymore, because I'm kind of bouncing between both. And then we've got 2, my sister and my dad, running the front office also during the day. So, reasonably sized team. It's 7,200 square foot shop, and we've got 7 lifts plus an alignment racks. Lots of room to work on cars, but it always feels like we need more and more techs. And the work doesn't stop here. We'll be booking out 2-3 weeks sometimes, and sometimes we're down to a week, and then we're like, oh shoot, we gotta pick up business. And then we look around and there's like 40 cars at the shop. It's like, okay, well, we still have the cars here, nothing's slowing down. We're just caught up a little bit, but it always comes in waves.
Yeah, very cool. What are some of the favorite builds you've worked on, or just in general, like what are the favorite cars you like to spend your time with when you are, filling your tech duties?
Yeah, well, it's tough because I'm definitely I grew up with Volkswagen, so I love Volkswagen, but maturing a little bit, I'm an Audi guy through and through, obviously, with what we're doing right now, but I only own Audis right now. So, when we get Audis in the shop, that's definitely like my peak interest. And some of the fun cars I like are just, it sounds boring if you're not a wagon guy, but wagons are like the coolest thing to me. So when we get guys that bring in all roads or A4, S4 wagons or whatever, and they want to do some cool stuff, I'm always like let's do it. I'm the guy that'll figure out the ideas and figure out, cool things to do to make your wagons, not so boring dad cars. But, we just had a B5 RS4 in the shop here, left last week. I was here for a couple of weeks while we had to hunt down some parts. For me, like always being a wagon guy, like that was the coolest thing to have recently. And didn't really do a lot of work to it, turbos, some other stuff, but it was more of a situation of like, I've dreamt of being around and driving one of these cars for so long. And I've had clones and other B5s, but it doesn't compare to the real deal. So just like being able to experience these things and just drive it for a little bit and work on it. Those are the cars I like. We've built so many other cars. It's hard to just capture one. We've done all the A4 wagon swaps, with almost every B8 engine possible, whether it's a 3-liter supercharged or 4.2 V8 S5 or RS5. I currently work on a T twin turbo S6 swap into my all road. So I don't know, we're wagon nerds. That's my favorite thing here.
Nice. Yeah, I can definitely relate to you there. And I saw some content from a few years back of like a B8 S4, or I guess all road conversion you turned into an S4. So it seems like you and the team love to do a lot of those like, builds of the forbidden fruit, right? The things that we didn't get over here in North America or the States, and creating that, kind of OEM plus creation, right?
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, it's funny because like I wish Audi would have brought these cars here, but also on the other hand, because they didn't, it kind of got our foot in the door building these cool cars. And, I don't know, Audi's doing their own thing sometimes, and it feels like maybe they're not listening to what the enthusiasts want, but obviously whatever they're doing is working because they're selling cars. But it's like, man, I wish we could have some cool wagons. So until the RS6 came here, obviously, the coolest thing to do, 2008 was the last year we got a cool sport wagon with the S4, B7 4.2 V8 manual. That was the last cool wagon we really had in the States. And then, since then we've done all the B8 swaps. I had the first I bought a brand new all road and brand new S4 and swapped the engines back in 2018. No one's done it since then, so that was kind of cool to be like the only one, but that was a lot of work. And then, right after I built that car, Audi is like, hey, we're bringing the RS6. So I kind of feel like maybe there's somebody at Audi that thought, hey, this guy's doing this crazy car, let's bring a cool wagon. So maybe I'm to blame for that. If you have an RS6, you could say, hey, Tyler's a cool guy because maybe he inspired something there. But the reality was, I think a lot of guys too, when the RS6 finally came here, they stopped wanting to build their cars because they could actually buy the cool wagon now. Then on the other hand too, ours, fully specs $140,000+. So that's also not super attainable for a lot of guys. So it's still cool that we could build these cool B8 or even B9 wagons, have great daily drivers, for $30,000, $40,000, and it's not really entirely breaking the bank, but it's also a fun car that you can roll up to Cars and Coffee and pop the hood, and you're the only one there with a cool power wagon. And regardless of whatever RS6 is there or anything else, yeah, wagons are cool again.
Yeah, no, that's always a cool moment at Cars and Coffee and events when you see one of those things pull up and it looks basically OEM, and you're like, okay, what's the deal with this thing? If it's old enough, was it imported, or is it like a true full on local conversion, right? Like that someone might do with Pacific German. So that's always pretty exciting. What I always wonder with shops like Pacific German, what do you find is the balance in like the build, like the origination of these builds? Like, is it a lot of just checking the boxes for your clients to come in and say they want to do this build in this way to get to this endpoint? Or are there a lot of like homegrown builds you guys are coming up with and either doing on your own or maybe pitching in collaboration with your clients? How does that look?
Well, it goes a little bit of both because we're in Southern California. California in general is rough with emissions. So everything has to be, at least in my opinion, like smog legal emissions compliant. So when we do these builds, we're doing stock emissions entirely, stock intake, stock tuning, stock catalyst. Like I want it to be as if Audi had done the car. If the customer wants to, or client wants to modify the car later on, that's totally fine. And we could assist with that. But every build that I've done engine swap wise has been something where we finish the car. And if it's a client's car, I'll give them all the documents they need to go to like the California Emissions Testing Center. It's a state referee. They could get the conversion refereed, and they get a little label that goes in the door jamb to show for smog purposes in the future. It's totally legit. They won't have any issues with that. So I think for me, that's the more important part, because it's a car that not only are they building and having like this crazy conversion that's one off, but it's also something that they don't have to jump through these hoops on. They're emissions legal. They're totally fine there. And that's always been like the conversions that I've even done for myself. They had to be emissions compliant. And I mean, there's guys doing on the East Coast, non-emission areas, maybe V10s and just other super radical, conversions in their cars. And I want to do that so bad, but I also don't want to get in trouble with emissions. And especially like when it's our shop doing it, I don't want to put a red flag out there for that. Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is emissions. And, when a client will have ideas, we kind of run through, like, I'll give them some options, like, hey, this is what we can do. This is the easiest way to do it. This is a hard way to do it, but it might be kind of cool if we went that way. Sometimes some conversions are easier to find than others. Like, if you want to do an S4 B8 swap, you could find a lot of crashed S4s available. So the 3 liters are pretty plentiful. We've done the RS5 conversions, but they're just harder to find a 4.2. Especially since the one we did was right before COVID, and that worked great. And then when COVID happened, then everyone all of a sudden wanted to be a YouTube car rebuilder, so the crashed auction prices went up like crazy, and cars are getting harder to find. And then there was interest in all these older cars again, so people are fixing them. So the certain car markets went up, and then the RS5, it's kind of leveled out a little bit, but that is going to probably become a more appealing conversion to do again soon. But yeah, I mean, I'll put some ideas out there, and we'll see where the customer wants to go with it. And if they want to do something crazy, then we'll do it. And, there's certain times too where it's like, we have to do all the service work. We have to do the maintenance stuff. And we want it to be a great runner when we're done. If it makes sense to do while the engine's out, that's the best way to attack it. Last thing you want to do too is put a car together that's unreliable. It's going to be a problem. It's got to check engine lights or warnings. And then you're not happy with the ownership because you have to keep taking it apart to fix things. The biggest thing for me is to have any of these cars to be 100% reliable daily. No warning lights, no air lights, a car that you could drive without hesitation. And some of these cars too might only be like a weekend cruiser, but if it's not going to be reliable, the client's wife is probably going to hate the car, and they're going to get mad at them for spending the money on it. So we just want to keep everyone happy.
Yeah, very cool. So I want to get back to something you said earlier. You said you grew up around Volkswagens. So being part of this business and working on cars with your dad and being in SoCal with the car culture mecca of the U.S., like, how did you first get the itch for European and German cars? Like, what drew you in?
Yeah, I mean, my dad always had Volkswagens growing up, and the Golf 2 and Jetta 2s, or Mark 2s for some of the kids call them. That's kind of a new car back when I was growing up in the 90s, so that's what I was always around. My favorite car growing up as a kid was the Volkswagen Corrado. I just thought that was the coolest car, 2-door, sports coupe essentially. And the VR6 engine sounded so great. Growing up with that, and then, Audis weren't super popular, at least I feel like with enthusiasts or just maybe in my life, until like the B5 really came out. The older stuff was still there, and I do remember my dad working on them back in the day, but the B5s really popped. So, but when I got my license, actually before I got my license, I was 13 years old and I bought my first Volkswagen Corrado. So that was always had been my dream car. And I grew up playing, Gran Turismo 2 and other video games. So I always wanted like a B5 S4 or like an 8L, S3. Those are always like the dream car. But for a, teenager kid, the Volkswagen was the more reasonably priced and affordable car. So I spent like a whole summer working with my dad, and then bought a G60 Volkswagen Corrado from one of my dad's friends. This is like not running parts car, but I knew everything has a a vision if you put your mind to it. So I had a whole plan for this car, and I was going to rebuild and restore it. And 6 months later, I parted it out and bought another Corrado, but I went VR6 the second time. So I knew what I wanted engine wise. But I mean that was I love Volkswagen, but after a couple years, I realized, where I want to get in life. Volkswagen is great, but Audi is fantastic. And there's more guys who own Audis that are maybe not like the Volkswagen guys are great at the DIY thing. If you could have a new Volkswagen GTI or Golf R brand new off the dealer lot, and you go on Google and say, how do I do this? And there's a million guides that do it. So a lot of guys are more willing to take that on in their garage, where on the Audi side or Porsche even side of things, there's less information out there, which is cool on the side of, job security for me. Well, if I could learn how to do these things that people don't know how to do, or it's not so easy to do, then I could do it. And more of the Audi guys or Porsche guys are more grown up. They have less time to tinker in their garage. So they're more willing to drop their car off at a shop and, pay to get things done. So I realized, younger, that if I want to be like in the cool Audi world or cool, Lamborghini, Porsche, whatever, if I want to afford those things, I need to learn how to work on those cars too, because those guys want to spend the money to do it. So I moved to B5 S4 right before I got out of high school. And I love Volkswagen. I've owned a bunch, but I've kind of, grew up with my customers and enjoy the cars with them and had a lot of fun with that. So, but I'm still a Volkswagen guy. I still want to own a old rally Golf or, maybe a GTI or Golf R or something one day. But the Audi side of things is just a lot more fun, I think.
Yeah, very cool story. So maybe let's move into one of your other, notable builds. Of course, is that 8L S3 in Imola Yellow that you imported from Mexico. Would love to hear more about that. I found that story in Quattro so interesting because the S3s and the RS3s now are so celebrated that they've had some years here in the States to get into the enthusiast community, but so many people forget about, in my opinion, those first two S3s that Europe and then some other markets got. So, how did you first get involved in, or you even have an affinity for that car? Was it just kind of a natural tie-in to those, the Volkswagen hatches, like the Corrado and the Golf? That was like, oh, here's effectively the Audi version, right? Because it's based on the Mark IV Golf R, right? Effectively, where the platform is shared. So, how did you first how did you first discover that car and decide, yeah, I want to make a project out of that and import one?
Yeah, so I mean, I played video games, and I knew what the S3 was back then. What was it, granted, like late 90s. And I remember talking to my dad, and he's like, that car doesn't exist here. We don't have that. And as a kid, I couldn't understand why. It's like that was a bummer. It's like, this is such a cool looking car. It's basically a Mark IV Golf, or TT 225 in the hatchback form. So that was kind of the cool thing about that. But yeah, I mean, it's just always kind of thinking that was a cool car. I'm obviously a wagon guy now, but hatchbacks are kind of like the same idea, just a little bit smaller. So I always kind of like that car, but I never really set out to own an 8LS3. It's always a car that'd be cool to have, but I figured, it's kind of a weird opportunity. It'd be kind of difficult to get one, but I was at a local SoCal Audi Club drive. We were doing Ortega Highway a couple of years ago, and in the pre-meet spot, we're in the parking lot, and this yellow 8LS3 just rolls right in, and I'm looking at the car. I'm like, how is this car here? So I go to talk to the guy who had it, and super nice guy, and obviously, being an Audi guy, started asking questions, and it's cool that he was also an Audi guy because he knew the answers to it, and we were talking about it. It was already imported here to California. Like his family had owned the car. They imported it sometime, I think, in 2017, 2018. So that was the interesting thing to me because it was already something that was here, like registered in California, which is pretty tricky in the first place. So, probably more of like a gray market import kind of car, considering it was under 25 years old. But yeah, he was super cool. He showed me all the cool features of the car. I thought the rear pop-out windows were the coolest thing about it, and that's not something you see in Gran Turismo. So I've seen that in real life, and just seeing these windows pop was like, E30 M3 or old school Volkswagen Golf, like pop-out windows, like that was just the coolest thing. So, and OEM Recaro seats, 6-speed manual, all-wheel drive, 1.8 turbo. I mean, if we had that car here in the early 2000s, that would have absolutely just, took over the tuner scene with Fast and Furious and everything being so hot at that time. And it probably would have taken away from Volkswagen Golf sales or GTI sales, but ultimately, on the Audi side, you really only had like TT, which some guys thought were maybe a little feminine, for what the car is. And then you had the B5 S4. And don't get me wrong, I love the TT, so don't take that the wrong way. But yeah, the B5 S4, I mean, you really didn't have like a small Audi market car in the US. And I think the S3 would have absolutely killed it. But again, decisions Audi makes that obviously, I'm not, in control over. But yeah, so I'm talking to the guy who had the car, and I just made the joke like anyone would, if you ever want to sell this thing, let me know. And he's like, yeah, I don't think I'll ever sell it. Well, a couple of years, and we like talked to his friends on Facebook or whatever for a while, and he hit me up out of the blue last year, and he's like, hey, I'm thinking moving on to another project. If you want the S3, it's for sale. And at the time, I had way too many cars, and I didn't even like bother telling anyone in my family. I'm like, if I say something, everyone's think I'm going crazy for trying to buy. I had like 8 cars at the time. Like, I can't have another car around the shops. A few months went by, and I sold a couple cars, and just randomly one day I had this idea of like building something fun and old. And I had just sold a B5 S4 Avant that I had that was all RS4 wide bodied. So I was kind of itching to have like something from the early 2000s again that was just a little bit different. I hit him up, hey, you're still thinking about selling this? And he's like, yeah, actually, it's just sitting out on the street. And we talked a little bit more, and he drove it down the next week, and I bought it. So totally like it kind of seeked me out in a sense. Even though I hit him back up to buy it, like I wasn't really thinking about buying it. It was just a cool idea. And my idea at the time when I bought the car was to ship it or build the car here and then ship it to the East Coast. And Southern California, West Coast, we have a couple car shows and Audi gatherings. It doesn't feel, even though it's weird, California is like such a big community for car culture, but it's very maybe oversaturated, and a lot of guys won't waste the time to go to events and drive more than an hour to do anything. It almost feels like it's kind of falling apart in a sense of at least the car community and car culture. There's still the clubs and club drives and things, but it's just not as big as it used to be maybe. I've been to a couple of East Coast shows over the last couple of years, and going to Eurotripper, Low Show, all these events I see photos of too, where it's like there's definitely the culture still there. And talking to some of the guys at Low Show last year that were driving out 10 plus hours to head to this little Volkswagen car show in Pennsylvania, or Audi car show too, in a sense. It blew my mind, because people here in California, again, maybe they'll drive from Vegas or NorCal 4 to 6 hours in the most, but there's like 5 or 6 guys that'll do that. So it's very interesting, the East Coast vibe. So again, I want to build this car. My plan was to ship it to Florida for Eurotripper at the end of January this year, and then basically just drive it to each event and leave it at someone's house, or put it in storage or something on the East Coast, and just drive up the coast and finish at Low Show, and then either drive back cross country to Pacific Northwest, has a car show towards the end of the year as I do that, or just ship it back to Cali. But I don't know, crazy idea, but part of me too, it's like, growing up and reading, posts on VW Vortex or the Fortitude pages, and watching events like H2OI and Waterfest and all these things that happened in the late 2000s and early 2000s, where I was in high school, just sitting in the computer lab, just reading about these events and stuff. And it's like, that was where maybe the Mark IV was like prime, and everyone had a Mark IV GTI or a B5 S4 or something, and they were going to these events. And I kind of felt like the S3 is like a perfect version of me being like a Mark IV kid again. I'm like having a car of that era and road tripping, to these events, because even though going to these car shows with my rental Chevy Malibu was great, it doesn't feel that impressive to roll up to a car meet in a Chevy Malibu and talking to guys I met on Instagram. That's fun, but I don't really get to show anything off. I get to enjoy their builds and talk to them, and that's like part of it too. But I just thought, man, it'd be so much cooler to have my own car at these events, and kind of showing how SoCal could do it too. But I got really close. I ran into a snag with the transmission on this S3, and unfortunately, when you're buying parts and building cars, things can spiral out of control. And when I bought the car, it's like, I'm not a big 1.8 turbo guy, so I thought, let's just put a VR6 into it. All my cars have engine swaps nearly, but VR6 made the most sense. So I sourced a 3.2 VR6 from a TT, and then a 6-speed manual transmission from an R32, and BBSs and Porsche brakes, and just all these parts. So okay, get it all together. The transmission was supposed to be good. Bought it from like a pretty reasonable local guy, but unfortunately, I get it onto the car like 2 weeks before the transport would have picked it up, and I started to shake it down and put some miles on it. And then I drive the car, and the gearbox is whining like crazy. And unfortunately, the input shaft bearing was worn out completely, and the case was worn. So, but I got to the point where I was like, I really only have Sundays to work on this car, or like an hour after work each night. So it would have turned into a situation of just like really rushing it. I wouldn't have gotten any shakedown miles on it, which would have been, kind of a bummer before I ship it cross country and drive it, 1,000+ miles. So didn't make it the Eurotripper. And the crazy thing is, I'm laying out on the beach in Florida for like the Eurotripper weekend with my girlfriend. We still went out there to do the show just without the car. And then my brother at the shop here where I'm storing the car calls me like literally on that Friday morning. He's like, hey, I went to fire up the S3 this morning and move it, and the power steering rack blew up. So just like, random car stuff, just like one of the only things I didn't replace on it. But it would have been my luck too if I rushed that car to get it ready for the event, shipped it across country, and then pull it off the trailer and something blew up. So it's a Mark IV. It's a Volkswagen thing. That's, I guess, just how things go. But it's probably for the better that I didn't rush it. I finally have the car together now, where I built the transmission, went through it. Starting to do some shakedown miles on the car. I just had it out at the SoCal Euro Spring Festival, and that was an awesome time with the car, and it's running and driving great. There's still a lot of little things I want to fix and clean up on it, which is, again, great that I didn't ship it out, because there's always like the project. You're finding more things like, okay, I want to make this better, do that better. But I'm probably going to perfect it, hopefully somewhat this year, and then ship it out for the events next year. And at least I'll have some shakedown miles on it before then.
Yeah. Wow, very cool story. Yeah, I mean, that's just an impressive car to be putting all that time in for the build, because it's just something you're not really going to see, right? I mean, I imagine wherever you take it around locally, you haven't really found, a duplicate or a clone or anything near it, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, there's only a handful of 8L S3s in North America. Most of them tend to be on the East Coast, from what I know. H&R imported a couple, I think, back in like the early 2000s. But yeah, no, it's a pretty unique car. Anywhere I've taken it, everyone's like, oh my God, what is this? And especially at SoCal Euro, it definitely brought some crowds over. I mean, it's cool because it's just something we didn't have. I think the neatest thing about it is, you see the Audi badge on it, you see the hatchback, and you see the S3. And because we have a S3 today, it's somewhat familiar. It's not like it's someone's seen an S1 badge or something where they just don't know what the car is in general. But S3, it's okay. Then you have to remember, do we ever see that car? Did we get it? Why does it seem familiar? Well, it's Audi brand, it's Audi DNA, so it's still something that you're gonna to see and think about. Definitely has brought some crowds over, and a lot of my friends that had cars, with me growing up 15 years ago. Maybe they grew up and they're doing their family stuff now, but they still hang around. They've seen the car and they're just like, whoa, what is that? They've only seen pictures of these cars too, So it's definitely unique, and it's cool. There's only a handful in the US, so it's definitely not something that you'll see, at events or anything like that. And unless maybe it's just something really big, Audi specific where someone else has one. But I do think in the next couple of years, because it's
That's hitting
relatively
25 years old about
yeah,
now, right?
yeah. So right now you can import a 2020, I'm sorry, a 2000, being that it's 2025. That'll be a pre-facelift S3. So it has two-piece headlights. It has the older door handles. I think it's a slightly less powerful engine without barrel valve time. So just like early version of that car essentially. But give it a year or two, then we could start importing the facelift cars. These cars are, I mean, they're relatively inexpensive. You could get them from the UK, right-hand drive. They have rust, which kind of sucks, but my car's from Mexico, so it's so beautiful, and it's dirty, but no rust underneath, which is the greatest thing. But a lot of the guys have issues with like rocker panels rusting out, the sunroof drains and stuff will rust out around the windshield. Definitely just make sure, I think with any car you buy from Europe, you just make sure there's not any weird rust on it. But you could snag them for $7,000 to $10,000, plus the shipping and stuff. So it's reasonably affordable for what you're getting. Which in retrospect, if you buy an 8N TT 225, you're gonna get that car for $5 or $6 grand, which is really the same car just in a coupe version. But it's kind of cool that buying an S3, at least all the mechanical stuff you could get from a US spec car. Just the hard stuff to track down is the exterior stuff, and I've gotten a lot of things from Audi Tradition, which has been great. I wish they had better support here. So I've had friends and other companies that we deal with at the shop here. Luckily, I just hit them up and say, hey, here's some part numbers, get them over. And really, there's only been like a couple things I couldn't get, like a center console or a windshield brand new anymore, which is kind of a bummer. But most trim, I got an instrument cluster brand new. That was kind of cool, just like little things that, a couple $100 here and there because it's such an inexpensive car in the first place, But the problem with the cars in Europe is that since they were Audi's entry S car, and then they got cheaper over the years and forced on the turbo, they got really popular with the tuner. So a lot of them did get tuned and beat up and kind of raced around. Finding some good parts in that aspect were sometimes a little tricky because things are a bit beat up. But overall, I think they're fun cars because of you're not buying like an RS4 and RS2 where you're spending $100,000 on this car, and then parts are like so difficult to find. S3 parts body wise are kind of specific to S3, but it's still pretty widely produced cars, so things are still easy to track down.
Yeah, right. And I imagine some of those parts got to be out of production too, right? I mean, for the reasons you mentioned over in Europe, they're probably just not even sourcing a lot of these parts for the early A3 and S3, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, center console and windshield. My console has some scratches on it, which bums me out, and there's a pre-facelift and there's a facelift, and it's different consoles and different colors, and windshields are tricky. Even if the windshield was available, I couldn't imagine what it would cost to ship a glass windshield. When I built my B9 all-road a couple of years ago, I did all of the OEM black optics window trims in 2018, and that's before we could get the black optics here for the all-road in the US. I had to ship rear quarter windows because that's the only way to get like the trim thing around the window, and the first set of windows I received were broken. So it's just like shipping glass is not the easiest thing, I guess, but a windshield, I can only imagine how big and tricky that would be. But I still need it. So if anyone's watching this and they can get me a windshield, definitely let me know.
Yeah. You got to rely on the small volume of other fellow breeds that are running around the U.S. I honestly didn't even know they were. Your story was interesting to me because I didn't know they were even sold in Mexico. New, not Canada, right? Just Mexico.
Yeah, I don't think Canada got it. So I think it was a Mexico, maybe South America only kind of thing. It's crazy. Like I still have the initial car owner's manual stuff came with the car, and flipping through that, it's like seen as in Mexico City for service and stuff like that. It's like, it's just kind of cool. Everything's in Spanish. So I'm like trying to translate it all. And it's just different because most of my clients here at the shop, they'll bring in RS2s from, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, RS4s from Italy. So it's just like looking at those cars and seeing, the European version and looking at my car, and it's still like from America. It's just a different part of America that I'm from. But it's kind of cool that the history I've seen, maybe just thinking of what that car has seen, what it's driven through, where it's been. The cars from Europe are always cool because they've been in Europe, but at least this car too has been, kind of, in my opinion, if I could bring it to the East Coast and drive it around, then it's kind of like it's been all over, this continent. So that is pretty cool, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I wonder how, as you mentioned, the guy you bought it from must have been some kind of gray market situation with it being 2017 when it sounded like he brought it in. But not to get too deep into like DMV nuances and stuff, but were there any challenges for you when you took the car in a year or so ago in terms of just getting it legally registered in California, since it's not quite, it's a 99, right? So it's not quite at that mark, or is it?
Yeah, well, it's my car is a 2001. It's a
Oh,
facelift
it's a one.
car. It was already registered in California when I got it, and there's been a couple in the U.S. Since before my car, at least that I know of. So I know there's been guys who brought them in, in one way or another, and they all seem to have been brought in from Mexico, which I don't really know if that's related or if that just seems coincidental. But, being that my car was already registered in California, I think the trickiest thing when I started to look into it was to see how I could still register it here, and that would have been, or at least involved trying to smog the car. But because it was a version of the four-cylinder turbo that we didn't technically get in the US because it was a slightly different engine code with some slightly different emissions things, it wouldn't necessarily been possible. So again, gray market, don't know how he brought it in. And if anyone's watching this video, it'll probably hurt the value of the car because it's not like superficial or anything. But the reality is they somehow got it here. It's been registered here. That's cool. But on the other hand, too, I knew I was going to engine swap the car anyway. So I'm focusing on, trying to get an emissions legal for California with the 3.2 swap. And I figured initially with the four-cylinder turbo to try to smog that car here, I'd have to almost buy a whole TT and swap all the emission stuff over anyways. So then on the other hand, it's like, well, if I'm going to have to do that, I might as well just VR6 swap it and then just do the mission stuff with that one. And at least it's an engine that I appreciate a little bit more. It's a little more torquey than a multi, more peppier, funner to drive. So, that's the plan. Maybe later this year, if I have the opportunity, I'll get all the mission stuff sorted and get it registered here.
Yeah, nice.
Quick question for you, Tyler. You were talking about the color of the car, and obviously Amola's one of your favorite colors. Do you happen to know within the Mexican market, because you're right, it was a Mexican market, maybe even South American market only car for the Americas. Is Amola an exclusive color for that car, or was that the standard palette? Do you happen to know?
From my knowledge of playing Gran Turismo, I know that Imola Yellow is a standard color, but I don't know if that was specific to Europe or if it was Mexico or anything else. I have seen other S3s in Imola Yellow, along with red, Nagara blue, silver, black. So those seem to be popular colors, but most of the guys, at least it's weird that the guys from the Mexico and South America don't really seem to be on the Facebook groups or the forums as much as like the guys in Europe would be, or maybe I'm just reading the wrong forums. I don't know, but the European guys are always saying how special Imola Yellow and Nagara Blue are. I think those are more like the SOT 4 colors. I like red, so I wish it was red, but I love Imola Yellow. It's definitely like I've had a bunch of Audis in that color. It's one of my favorites too, but I think it's more of a unique color. There's definitely seem to be less of them out there. I was hunting around for some little body panels and trims and stuff, and the yellow seemed to be the hardest to find. So, but maybe it's just a 25-year-old car thing too. Who knows? But I'm not sure if I've seen any exclusive colors at all from the 8LS3. I'm sure there's got to be something out there, but information seems to be a little hard to find.
Yeah, I wonder if they were even were they doing Audi exclusive at that time? I don't think that kind of got popularized later on, right? Like the early RS4s and S3s might have just been factory or bust,
I've seen some B5 RS4s in exclusive colors, just like
Really?
some guys, again, just weird European posts, and it's like, oh, this is exclusive or something. It definitely seems a lot more unique. I think for the US, I'm not sure. I think maybe the S8 might have been one of the first cars offered an exclusive. And like I've seen a B6 A4 in Nagara Blue, which I thought was nuts that you'd spend all the money on exclusive for a B6 A4, not just buy an S4 in the first place. But yeah, it seems to be early 2000s was a little interesting for exclusive. I don't think it was as popular. Maybe it just wasn't really offered so much.
Yeah. Did you spend any time digging into production numbers with Audi? I know sometimes they can give you that info directly, but just curious if they shared what that looked like for Mexico/South American S3.
That would be good to learn or find out. I actually reached out to Audi UK and Audi USA and Audi Mexico about the car when I was trying to get it registered, and I needed to figure out the weight of the car, like officially from the manufacturer. And the only one of the three that replied, actually Audi USA did reply to me and told me someone would get back to me in 2 days, and then no one did. That was months ago. But it could have been automated. And then someone from the UK actually got back to me to let me know that VIN didn't exist in their system. Obviously, different market, so whatever the case is. But they told me they were willing to help me if I could, do these other things for them, which I just didn't bother with. But I never got an email back from Mexico, so I'm sure there is a way to figure out the production run, but I generally have no idea on that. I'd be interested though to probably dig into it and find out. It might be kind of cool to know.
Yeah. And did they bring the next one was the 8P, right? Did they bring that one to Mexico too? Do you know?
Well, we got the 8P A3 here,
Right.
not the S3, but I think I'm very positive Mexico got the 8P S3 also. I know I've seen a two-door P with Mexican plates on it at one of the shows like years ago, so I'm pretty sure it's an S3 I saw. But again, we only got the 8P as a four-door, so it's kind of I don't know. Two doors are cool, but four doors aren't so bad.
Yeah. Now you can't get two-door Golfs anymore. So it was back when we had choice.
Yeah.
3-door, 5-door, or 4-door in some cases. Anyway, so what's next? I mean, obviously a lot going on, as you mentioned, with the S3 for next year's show run that you're planning to do on the East Coast. But anything else major in the works for it, or is that the primary objective right now, just to kind of get it shaken down for that?
Yeah, I'm just shaking it down. I have I'm missing a box of parts that I know I have somewhere at the shop. I just can't place where it's at, and like little things like if you're familiar with old Audis, you'll know like the auto dimming mirrors, like the latest color and the dimming stops working. So I have a spare mirror. I have the instrument cluster I mentioned earlier. That's in a box too. I just can't find it. The original one from Mexico is in kilometers, so I bought a mile per hour one from Europe. But some interior trims. I want to. Every day I'm like looking at the car. I actually just put it in storage last week so I could stop getting some bad ideas for a little bit. But I was thinking about maybe pulling the interior back apart and having all leather wrapped or Alcantara wrapped or something, just to push a little bit further. The other part of me is like, I need to find the time to drive it and enjoy it and have some fun with it. So if you saw it in the magazine feature, it's mostly together. Dennis D-Pod came out and he shot it with me down the street here, but got the BBS 88s on it, H&R coilovers, new speed sway bars, got the Brembo Cayenne brake calipers. I put a roll bar inside of it, the Pepita Recaro. So it's like, it looks nice, and it's a fun cruiser for right now. And I think I just want to get the rest of the trims on it and kind of bring it back to just 100% in a sense, and try to drive it a little bit. But the problem I have too is I've also got a lot of other Audis. So I've got a B5 RS4 that's wide bodied. It's kind of a project car. I've got the B8.5 all-road 4T swap that I'm doing. It's just 95% done, just little things to wrap up. I've got an R8 that kind of up in the air if I'm going to keep it or sell it or anything else, and a few other cars. So it's just between working all day long and then just trying to work on my own cars. And now summer is coming, so it's like, man, it's so hot during the day, and then I've got an hour or two after work each night, and just Sundays, and just trying to find time for everything. It makes it a little tricky. But I think the S3, I did think about maybe supercharging it or turboing the car, but then I thought, well, it's a fun driver. It doesn't need to be super fast. 250, 270 horsepower is great for that car. Just needs to sound good, drive nice, be reliable. So that's probably where I'm going to leave it, at least power wise. But I don't know. The other part of me is like, just strip the whole car down and repaint it and restore it and make it perfect. And the other part of me is like, well, it's gonna be a road trip car, so it doesn't have to be a full on concourse car. But if it's something that looks cool and people like, that gets some good attention, then that's really the coolest thing is for me. So it looks good, sounds good, drives nice. It hits every box right there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, look forward to hearing more about the progress, and obviously plenty going on between the all-road and the S4 and everything else you got working. But is there anything up higher in the sky that you're kind of aiming for as your next build or your next wish list build that you'd want to do, maybe a year or two from now? What's on your list?
Yeah, so still I need that RS4. So even though I've had my wide body clone and the S4 wide body sedan I have right now, I'll ultimately probably end up selling the sedan I have and moving into a real RS4 soon. And for the longest time I wanted an RS2. I've got a local friend / client that has 4 of them, and working on those cars and driving them, it's made me realize those cars are a bit trickier to get some parts for. And it's super rewarding to get the older cars working and running nicely. But I don't know, the kid in me is like, I grew up with the B5, so that's still like my holy grail car, and an RS4 will probably be where maybe I keep it forever in a sense. But my mindset right now is maybe sell the R8 that I have and buy a bigger house with a bigger garage, and then I have the space to throw an RS4 in there and bring the S3 home from storage, and just at least I have like a cool garage in the meantime. But it's hard to, like, I feel like I'm a little kid because I want to collect all the Hot Wheels, and have all these cool cars. But on the other hand too, it's like I don't have the space. I'm usually storing them at the shop. So I think my family gets frustrated when I bring a new car home, or just something shows up in the back of the lot and they're like, what is this? I'm like, oh, well, don't ask any questions. And then they find out it's my new car. So it's trying to keep everyone happy, but I want to, it's tough because like part of me too, it's like I go to these local car shows and events, and it's like, when I went to SoCal Euro, it's like, what car do I bring? And I had to convince my girlfriend to drive a car down with me, and she drove the S3. And the funny thing was, like, that was the furthest that car has driven since I put it together. So like I've driven it 10, 15, 20 minutes around town, but she drove it, an hour and a half to San Diego and back. So, I knew it would make it, but the other part of me too is like, well, at least I'm rolling with her, and I took the B5, but it's like I left the all-road home, I left the R8 home. It's like I could have brought these other cars. So I don't know. I guess the thing in me, it's like, it's cool to have these cars, but it's like, do I need so many? Because then when it comes to bringing it to an event, then I have a hard time choosing which one to take. And then I feel like the other cars get neglected because they sit. But it's tough because like being a car enthusiast, is there really one car that does everything? Maybe that's an RS6, I don't know. Or a B5 RS4, I guess we'll find that out. But I think like my dream garage would probably be B5 RS, maybe an RS6, C8 is like it's just like the cool wagon that you can buy that'd be easy and something you don't mind driving everywhere. I don't know. RS2 is still something to consider, but then it's like, do I need 3 wagons? I don't know. There's no wrong reason to that, but why not?
I want to jump in here because that B5 RS4 is, a halo car for so many enthusiasts that came up around that same time, the 2000s, that got into the scene. I think you may have seen it, maybe not, but if you hadn't, the Bring a Trailer auction for the B5, it was like 11,000 kilometers. I think it sold for like 170 something $1,000 at auction. Curious what you thought if you'd seen that and what you think about that, the impact of that on effectively the market for that car moving forward.
Yeah, so I was actually bidding on that car. And then I told my girlfriend, I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about buying another B5. And I kind of just left it there. And she's like, okay, yeah, no problem. I don't think she thought I was going to be spending maybe
leaving out the crucial details there. Just another B5.
Yeah, she probably thought it was maybe a sub $10,000 car. I was bidding on it. And I like Ava Silver. That was a great looking car. I'm actually kind of bummed that, I don't know. On one hand, I'm bummed that someone bought that car and just didn't drive it a lot. I kind of feel like these cars are so great. I would have actually daily driven the car had I won it. As crazy as that sounds, it's basically someone preserved this car that, it's still brand new. So it would have been a great car to, I would have obviously felt bad about it. But on the other hand, too, it's like you only live once, just drive the car, enjoy it. At least someone gets to enjoy it at that point. I was sitting in the office here bidding on it, and I was telling my sister, and she's like, what's it at? And I think I was at like 110 or something. I'm like, this is crazy, right? I'd have to sell the R8 to make this car justifiable. My sister's like, same deal. You only live once if you think it's worth it. And like, this is such a bad influence from my family. So I did stop there because, ultimately I do want like a Misano Red or a Imola Yellow RS4, if I went all the way in with it. But 175 was nuts. I was not expecting it. I kind of thought it would, kind of stabilize, 110, 120, somewhere around there. So it's cool to see it bring such a high number. And I think that for guys that are just starting to bring in RS4s now at the 25-year mark, it should help their values a little bit. I think it's going to make a lot of guys in Europe, who have these cars think what they have is all of a sudden worth, 2 to 3 times as much as what it should be worth. But there's a big debate too on some of the B5 guys that I've been talking to since that, because some guys will say that car that went for 175 was federalized, right? So that meant that, it's been changed, to make it federally legal, either for emission standpoint or headlights or cluster. And it seems like they reverted those things back. But some guys who are like purists will argue that's not really like a perfect car anymore, or it's original because it's been altered to some extent or another. And then there's guys that might be bringing in the 25-year-old cars that are perfectly original, non-modified, that might say, well, that's an original car, that's worth more. I don't know. I'm kind of in the boat that I think, in my opinion, a federalized car that car that went for 175 was registered in California at some point. So I think a federalized car that would have been registered in any state, in my opinion, is worth more, because that's a car that you could just buy and drive it and not have to worry about smog or DMV or anything like that. Where if you're bringing in a imported car that's 25 years old, technically, like if I brought in an RS2 or RS5 or 8LS0 now, I can't register it in California because it won't pass California emissions. You still have to, if you want to make that car emissions legal here, you have to run through emissions and state ref and all those things. So it's still hoops to jump through. Most of them get registered somewhere else, so easier for those guys, especially if you're not a California resident. But I don't know. It goes both ways as far as like what the values are. But yeah, I was in the running for that car. I think that one's nuts. It is funny where most guys that grew up with Audi, had a B5 RS4 at some point. It's cool that, most of these guys now want that car. And a lot of my RS6 customers used to have B5 S4s also. So it's cool to see them, have both cars or want that one. But, I don't know. That would have been a great one to own, I think, just to daily drive.
Yeah, I'm aligned with you on a lot of what you said there. Just like the federalization piece is like huge for me, right? Like if I follow the auctions pretty closely, and if I'm ever getting something that's been federalized or is in that like import gray area, it's like, yeah, if I can just drive off with it and title it, that's where I put the value. I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of think of it as like, okay, if it's been federalized, that more or less means that it's basically what the car would have become had Audi chose to market it here in the first place, right? As opposed to like getting gutted in some highly negative or adversive way. So yeah, I would probably put the value on the federalized example like this one apparently did. So I totally get that.
Well, what's interesting too is if you watch Bring a Trailer, I think early last year, or maybe 2 years ago now, there was that Goodwood Green or that sold in California for 60 something. I had some miles on it, and the front bumper had been replaced or fixed or repaired or something. And I know some guys were like against it because it was modified, but that was a federalized car that was emissions legal in California. Like, it ticked every box for me except the color. I know someone's gonna hate me for saying I don't like green, but I just wanted, if it's an RS4, I wanted a brighter color, something that pops out more. But I had just sold my purple wagon like right before that, and I was like, dang, do I want another darker color? I regret not buying it because that car again went for 60. I think that was a pretty good value for what you're getting for something that's already legal here to drive here and enjoy. If you want to bring in a real RS4 now, you're going to pay 40K for really beat up car plus all the transportation stuff, or you're going to pay 60 to 100 essentially for a super clean car, which depending on where you are financially, that might be a great value or might be insane. But for what you're getting, I think is a great car. It's crazy that you could buy a B5 RS4 wagon for $10,000 and get 75% of the enjoyment that you would out of an RS4. You won't feel so bad driving that B5 RS4 wagon every day that you would maybe on an RS4. But I'll tell you, I've driven so many B5s, then getting to that RS4 for the first time, even though it's like so close to being, what you're already familiar with, there's still something in that car that's different. It feels different, it drives different, it sounds different, and just the seats and radio, it's a very special car.
Yeah, and it's just something about the pull of the first homegrown 100% Audi RS product at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool too. Audi and Cosworth, put that engine together. It was fun for me to work on, one of the first ones that I've done, because it was like being so familiar with the B5 S4 in general, and then jumping into an RS4 and just seeing things that were different, and extra oil coolers and extra this and that, and then being super careful with taking this car apart too, because it's like I don't want to break something that's RS specific, and then it is a B5, so something's going to break eventually at some point. But I don't have any wood to knock on right now, but luckily I went through that car perfectly, and nothing happened. It was pretty bad, but yeah, it's just special. There's just something different about that car. That it's cool that Audi, I guess being one of their like real first RS cars in a sense, like you said, it's cool that they did that, because they didn't have to, but to have a car that would compete with BMW M cars, and in my opinion, annihilate the M cars at that time. They really put their foot down and showed what they could do.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously this one's on the list, but I'm going to ask you, what's your top three pick? I mean, you have so many cars already and builds that are ongoing, but and it can be any one of the ones you already have, I guess. But any cars in particular that, in addition to the B5 RS4, you would have in your dream garage. They could be stock, they could be builds, they could be totally irrational. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so last night I had a dream about a B&a-half RS4, so I'll probably have to put that up there too. And that could, maybe in 10 years I'll import a real one, or maybe I'll try to build one in the meantime. I don't know, but there's just something about how unique that car looks, and the high rev and V8, it's just so perfect. But I already have an R8, so I love the V10. That's definitely a dream of mine, and it's so cool to have that. But I think if I had to build the dream garage, it would probably be B5 RS4, B&a-half RS4. I don't see it RS6. I've worked on like probably around 200 of those things now, for customers' cars, and it's still a car I want to own at some point. Not saying it's like not justifiable right now, but it's funny. It's such a big car. I don't know if you've driven one, but it's like I had my B9 all road. I drove an RS6 for the first time in like 2020 or 2019, and it was so weird getting into that thing and feeling how big it was. But the RS6 it's a perfect everything kind of car. So that would be like my ultimate wagon lineup in the garage. And the RS4, the RS B8.5 or B5 are like the show cars, and the RS6 would be something I would just literally daily, because you could do everything with it. It makes all the power, it has all the creature comforts, it looks unique, it sounds good, so I think that is still one of the best cars we could get from Audi at the moment.
Yeah, totally. No, it's the all-rounder, like you mentioned. I go a little bit earlier preference for me personally. I want someday find a way to import the C5 RS6 Avant Plus, highly limited production from Europe. I don't even know what the numbers are, or if there's any even being federalized right now, because they're not at the 25-year mark yet. But that would be the dream for me, in the same way as your B.
A C7 RS6 would be kind of cool too, or even a C6 RS6, but
yeah,
I think I'd be, as much as I want a C6 RS6 just for how unique that is, I'd be worried about owning something that, at least with like a B5 RS4 or a B&a-half RS4, something like that, we could hunt down parts from kind of the US market and get things relatively easy. I just think twin turbo V10 might be tricky to get stuff, but that would be one to consider owning. I'm sure once they're importable, that'll be an interesting car to see roaming around town too.
Yeah, V10 Avance. Yeah, how cool is that? Well, anyway, we'll start kind of getting towards our wrap up here, but I did want to ask you, being involved in so many builds over the years and working on cars since a young age, like what advice do you have for younger enthusiasts who are just kind of stepping into the scene, whether it be, working at a shop or just doing their own builds at home? Like what would you advise them to, learn from or resources to use?
It's hard work. If you're working in a shop, you're standing up on your feet all day, you're working with your hands, you're looking up, so your back hurts. It gets hot here. I'm sure it gets hot in other states too. But I tell a lot of guys who kind of ask the same thing, and a lot of local kids and stuff. If you like it, if you like cars, if it's your passion, the great thing about this industry is that robots, AI, they can't take over our jobs. You could scan a car with a scan tool, but that only gets you so far. So knowing how to work on cars, knowing how to correctly diagnose things and fix and repair, that's definitely a skill that could be used for probably the rest of your life. And even though a lot of cars are going electric and that's the future, there's always be something new and more revolutionary. There's still gonna be the guys that are like me and you guys that want to keep these gas guzzlers in the garage and have fun with our loud V6 V8 cars. And there's still Porsche guys, they're going to drive their 964 forever, and all the old BMW guys. So the reality is I think there's still like a job security for knowing how to work on gasoline cars, whether it's a car from the 80s or 90s or 2000s or anything else in between. There's a lot of guys who already know how to work on it, so it's kind of a competitive industry. But if you want to learn how to work on cars, I've always said too, it's like don't start working for a common brand. Work for a brand that you like and enjoy and appreciate. I met a lot of guys who want to work on cars and they go to work at Toyota or Honda. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but man, if you have an Audi or if you want a Porsche or something like that, go work for those brands. Learn more about those cars and jump into that. And if you're just pushing a broom around an Audi dealer, at least you're still putting yourself in the mix and having fun with Audis and like learning as you go. For me, I got lucky. Maybe I cheated because my family was already into cars, so I just kind of got into the door at an early age. But my friends used to make a joke. It's like when you see those posts on the internet, it's like you need 10 years of experience and you're only 20 years old. Well, that was me already at that point because I had already been working for my family and on the cars for so long. So, but I mean, I think the biggest thing is you have to work hard for it. You have to want it. And, if you're really good at what you do and if you could, absorb everything and at least, realize that you don't know everything. And even I do so much, and it's tough because I have to know everything about everything. I'll have guys expect me to know about their cars and every single problem about them and how things work. And, trying to learn that and stay relevant with all these issues and problems. It's a lot, but it is pretty rewarding at the end of the day to be able to help and assist. I think a lot of the common person's mindset is they go to the car repair shop or they go to the doctor or something else, and they know it's going to be an expensive, thing, or it's going to cost them a lot of money to fix their car or whatever else, or to keep that going. I think a lot of guys forget we're just here to help. You can go to the dealer and pay the dealer a bunch of cash. You could go to us, independent shop, and we're probably better price. I'm here to help. I'm not here to be your enemy and find all these things wrong with your car. Ultimately, I'd rather tell someone what's wrong with their car now versus them break down on the side of the road and have issues later. So a lot of it for me is it's fun when we get to do the mods. And all the fun stuff, but it's also like when we have to do the repairs, those are the things that like I feel bad about when I'm building a quote, because it's like I know someone's not gonna have fun with this bill, at least if you come in for like a tune or exhaust, at least you're gonna be happy when you're leaving. But when you have to come in to fix an oil leak, that's kind of a bummer. If you could be good at fixing these things and learning the cars and having fun with it, then you get to enjoy those experiences with the customers when they're having fun, when they're driving their cars. I get to drive Lambos and R8s and other cars, supercharged R8s. I mean, that's like the coolest thing, and rip it around and waste gas that I'm not paying for. That's always the coolest part to these cars. Yeah, I don't know. You just have to want it. You have to work hard for it, because if it's something that you just expect it's going to come to you and you're going to learn it because someone else is teaching you, that's not a good way. But you could apply that to anything, any industry, any field. If you're not going to work for it and be the best at what you could do, you'll never have the success that you might want.
Yeah, 100%. Love that. Well, tell us more about where our listeners can follow more about your builds and ongoing projects with Pacific German.
Yeah, so you could find us on social media, on Instagram at Pacific German. I try to post on some of the Audi forums and other places too, but Instagram's the easiest. It's free. I could post up whatever I want there. We try to do the local meetups with Audi clubs of SoCal and some of the events. If you see me anywhere, whether it's in California or if you see me at a show on the East Coast, make sure you say hi. I love talking Audis. I love talking cars. So we'll probably ramble forever. And that's actually a part of the problem I get at some of these car shows is I just went to SoCal Euro and there's a few hundred cars there and I didn't get to see them all because I ended up talking to people. And sometimes the people are the best part about it, but the cars are pretty cool too. So that's why we're all there.
Awesome. Love that. Well, any other shout outs you want to give before we break?
Yeah, well, I'd like to quick shout out my family because obviously without them, we wouldn't have any of this. So all the crew at Pacific German, thanks for coming to work every day and helping us have fun with these cars. Thanks, Dennis, D-Pod, for shooting the S3 and being a cool friend and getting a few of my other cars in the Quattro Mag and staying around. Thanks to the guys at, ACNA. Thanks, Chris May, for setting this up. Thanks, Zach, for hosting. But thanks my girlfriend also. I can't forget her because she sticks up with me, doing all the car stuff and bringing new cars home and driving them to events with me and flying around the country with me. So definitely a plus to have a girlfriend that's into cars.
Well, yeah, man. Yeah, the patience and the acceptance of the hobby is key in this field.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, it was great having you on, Tyler. And thanks again for making your time and of course, your sponsorship of ACNA from Pacific German. It was great to talk with you and learn more about the shop and your builds. And of course, for our listeners and club members, check out the Imola Yellow article in the Q2 issue of Quattro to see more about some of that S3 build that Tyler has. So yeah, thanks again, Tyler.
Thank you, guys.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of All Wheel Driven. Please consider giving our show a rating, subscribe for future episodes, and email us your feedback at media@audiclubna.org. Be sure to check the show description for a link to submit your questions or express interest in joining future episodes of All Wheel Driven to share your Audi story with our community. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.